Welcome to Cannabis Class Episode 3, The Journey of Weed. Today, I'll be tackling where cannabis comes from, how it got to the US, and how it has been used throughout different cultures. There are a couple different narratives about the history of cannabis, but I'll try to stick to the main threads. The cannabis plant seems to have appeared in Asia, with evidence that the plant evolved 28 million years ago on the Tibetan Plateau, and the earliest usage being attributed to the rope from Czechoslovakia that I mentioned in the hemp video, circa 27,000 BCE. Its fibers were likely taken from wild-growing plants, including hemp and nettle. Cannabis spread throughout Eurasia, growing in Mongolia and southern Siberia by 10,000 BCE. In The Dragons of Eden, Speculations on the Origin of Human Intelligence, Carl Sagan commented on the possibility that cannabis was humanity's first agricultural crop. This comment is supported by proof of its use in the Stone Age in what is modern-day Taiwan. At the Oki Islands of Japan, a large collection of cannabis achenes, small, dry, one-seeded fruits that don't open to release the seed, were found in a stockpile dating to 8,000 BCE. This quantity, being found alongside other traces of organized human life, hints to its place in society. There is evidence of cannabis being used for food and oil by 6,000 BCE, and medically by 4,000 BCE. Similarly to poppy and opium, cannabis was used as a numbing agent, an anesthetic for surgery, as early as 4,000 BCE from carbon dating, and the 1st century CE from documented use by surgeon Hua Tuo, who reduced the plant to powder and mixed it with wine, a concoction called mafizan, translated to cannabis boil powder. It was also listed in the oldest Chinese pharmacopoeia, the Sheneng Benkojing, around 200 CE. It refers to dama or ma, meaning hemp, cannabis, numbness. The Chinese word for hemp, ma, is written by symbols meant to depict hemp, the image of two stalks side by side, and the term for anesthesia, mazui, is derived from cannabis intoxication. Cannabis traveled to Korea around 2000 BCE, then moved to the South Asian subcontinent over 1,000 years while Aryans, this being the archaic Indo-Europeans, invaded. It gained widespread use in India, medicinally, and ritually used as an offering to Shiva, who is said to partake of the plant. It is documented in the Hindu sacred text Arthavaveda, the knowledge storehouse of Arthavanas, the procedures for everyday life, sometimes referred to as just knowledge, or as the science of charms. The Arthavaveda talks of the 5 kingdoms of plants: Darba, Bang, Barley, Mighty Power. Now I don't know exactly how these work out as plants, or even just as a list of 5 things. But regardless, bang, or sacred grass, is the version that gets translated to hemp, although bang is known to be an edible preparation of the dried cannabis leaves, seeds, and stems being used in food and drink. This Sanskrit Vedic poem, written around 1000 BCE, talks about these plants that release us from anxiety. Around this time, the Middle East acquired cannabis, either from these Aryan cultures or from tribal communities like the Scythians, who moved through the Middle East and Russia, bringing cannabis with them, often as an entheogen, a chemical substance used in religious or spiritual contexts. Ritual use has persisted across many cultures and through centuries. The Yanghai tombs in northwest China revealed the grave of a 750 BCE shaman filled with almost 800 grams of THC-laden cannabis, preserved by climatic and burial conditions. This lends credence to its use as a psychoactive agent or for divination. Some of the earliest physical indications of smoking cannabis have been found in the tombs of the Jersenkal Cemetery in western China from 500 BCE, where cannabis residue was found in burners with charred pebbles, possibly used during funeral rituals. Another culture that gives us great insight comes from ancient Greece. Their mythologies are ripe with mention of the herb, and the Greek historian Herodotus tells of the Scythians inhaling vapors of hemp seed smoke for ritual and recreation. In his book, The Histories, 440 BCE, he tells how the, quote, Scythians, as I said, take some of this hemp seed, presumably flowers, and creeping under the felt coverings, throw it upon the red-hot stones. Immediately it smokes, and gives out such a vapor as no Grecian vapor bath can exceed. The Scyths, delighted, shout for joy. End quote. Herodotus provides a lively window into the rituals of the past. Carbonized cannabis seeds were also found in Pompeii, buried from the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 CE, So I guess you could say they were getting baked in Pompeii. No? Too soon? Anyways, in the 1st century CE, Pliny the Elder mentions cannabis root as a treat for gout and joint stiffness. In 800 CE, the Vikings used hemp rope and carried cannabis seeds to Iceland. Vikings and medieval Germans both used cannabis for pain relief during childbirth and with toothaches. The Germanic tribes moved cannabis to Germany and then to Britain during the 5th century Anglo-Saxon invasions. From there it continued its global expansion and presence, even being linked to witchcraft in 1484, banned by Pope Innocent VIII. Cannabis entered the Americas by means of the Portuguese, who took it to Brazil, and the British, who took it to Jamaica. In both cases, it was used in the pacification of slaves. In 1896, Holmes, in Prehistoric Textile Art of Eastern United States, mentions the Native Americans using hemp, and there are separate mentions of ritual use by other natives like the Wampanoag and Nauset people. Apart from smoking cannabis, hemp had been brought with Columbus and potentially arrived beforehand from the Vikings. George Washington and Thomas Jefferson had cannabis plants on their plantations, most likely for fiber and seed, with documentation that Jefferson's slaves planted his hemp in March, Washington's in April, and later Henry Clay, the Speaker of the House, growing hemp in Kentucky. Widespread use in the U.S. didn't follow until cannabis was more readily available as a narcotic, being brought to the South, particularly Texas, with Mexicans fleeing the Mexican Revolution of 1910 to 11. There had been a long tradition of smokable cannabis in Latin America after its introduction via plantations and networks of marihuaneros in Spanish-speaking countries. Then the backlash against cannabis began, with El Paso being the first city to have an ordinance against it in 1914. Many of the strains, styles, and growing techniques used in the U.S., like sinsemilla, came from locations across the globe. THC production outdoors occurs optimally within 35 degrees of the equator. So outside of the U.S., typical growing regions include Jamaica, Mexico, Nepal, Thailand, northern India, parts of Africa, Afghanistan, and Australia. Nepal saw huge growth in the 60s, post-arrival of the Beatles, which caused a swell in tourism until the U.S. and the UN leaned on their government to reduce production. In the late 60s, Afghanistan saw big growth encouraged by their government, and followed by a war in the mid-70s, after which hashish became the main component of their GDP. Cannabis was brought to the northwest U.S. in the 70s by, quote, hippies and the back-to-landers, making its way to the promised land of Humboldt. Not to mention the influx of vets, the most influential generation likely being those who served in Vietnam. Soldiers not only used local cannabis to cope during war, they also brought seeds home to North America, leading to some of today's most popular strains. According to veteran Bob Luciano, quote, during battle, we watched what farmers did with the soil because we just wanted an escape. You'd smoke weed and you'd watch the monkeys play in the trees and watch the farmers grow. End quote. Although Luciano, like many others, didn't return to the U.S., he took his seeds to Jamaica and experimented with crossbreeding and how environmental factors affected. There he learned things like the cultivation of nutrient-rich guano before his return. Since then, cannabis has been evolving in its growth methods throughout the U.S. And where as recently as 2000, 95% of hemp seed was used as animal feed in Europe, now there rages a battle between the black and white market for cannabis, with the current being yanked away and exposure to average citizens becoming commonplace. Those are the origins of the cannabis plant, the journey it took to modern-day U.S., and several facets of its use. As we approach the holidays, why not go try some semientiaka, a soup made from hemp seed in Slavic regions and traditionally eaten on Christmas Eve. Then come back, subscribe if it was good, leave me a comment if it was.